Hello friends, welcome to yet another module on experimental research. Today we are going to see about experimental research. It is also known as empirical research or it is data-based research. What is data? It is an attribute that can take on a numerical value. For example, if you say how many family members are there, you would say 2 or 3, you would give me a whole number. We can also have variables that are continuous. For example, if I ask you what is your weight or what is your height, you would give me a number which is on a continuous scale. So, data is used in experimental research or data is collected in experimental research. For a small example here, we have 3 glasses of a solvent which are at different temperature, hot, medium and cold, and we have a food dye. The dye is dissolved in these 3 different glasses of solvent, and we will check how much of the dye dissolves in this medium. For this purpose, we need to have a specified quantity of the solvent. We need to know the temperature, the exact temperature of the solvent, and then we can find out how much of the dye dissolves in these 3 different media. Here is yet another example. We have a seed that is placed in different culture media. The media are different with respect to the nutrients present in them. And you can very vividly see how the plant grows to different heights, to different colors in the different media. These can be measured. Now, this is what is an experiment. Experimental research, when classified under research designs, is classified as a conclusive research. That is because in an experimental research, you arrive at some very specific conclusion. The researcher's attempt is to objectively observe the phenomena which are made to occur in a strictly controlled situation. The experimenter tries to vary one or more variables and hold the others at a constant. Looking at it from a different perspective, a true experimental design is regarded as the most accurate form of experimental research in that it tries to prove or disprove a hypothesis mathematically with statistical analysis. Now, what are the elements of true experiments? There are 4 elements in a true experiment. 1. Manipulation. 2. Control. 3. Random selection, and 4. Random assignment. Let us look at each one of these in detail. Manipulation means that something is purposefully changed by the researcher in the environment. Control is used to prevent outside factors from influencing the study outcome. Random selection is how the sample of people are drawn from a population. Random assignment is how the samples are assigned to different groups of treatment of the study. Now let us look at this in further detail. The word randomization is very important in experimental research. The process by which each subject has the same chance of being assigned to either intervention or control. Neither the subject nor the investigator should know the treatment assignment before the subject's decision to enter into the study. This removes the investigator bias. Bias may be defined as a systematic error or difference between the true value and that actually obtained due to all causes other than sampling variability. In other words, random assignment is something like tossing a coin and you get either heads or tails, and you allot all the heads to one group and the tails to another group. It's as simple as that. Now let us look at further principles of experimental design. There are three principles of experimental design. The first one is principle of replication. The second, the principle of randomization. And the third, the principle of local control. The principle of replication means that when an experiment is repeated several times, it should give the same results. This shows that the experiment has been designed very well, perfectly, on scientific basis, and that is why you will get the same result every time. The principle of randomization is that you have allotted your subjects to the different groups so as to obtain a true value of the variable. Principle of local control. This is very important because the extraneous variables or other factors that may have an influence on the variable that is being tested must be controlled. Otherwise, the outcome of the experiment may be because of the other factors. So, when there is local control, the experiment is a well designed one. Experiments can be carried out in different settings. Experimental settings can be done in a field, that is in a real life setting, like for example in agriculture, it can be in a plot of land, or with human beings, it can be among a group of people, the community, or experiments can be set in the laboratory. Laboratory experiments are done in environments that are highly controlled by the researcher, and the outcome is truly because of the variables. A third setting of experiment is the internet experiment. It's conducted over the internet in cyberspace. This is being experimented but not yet fully adopted by various scientists. There are two main types of experimental design. One is the informal experimental design, and two is the formal experimental design. Very often we use the informal experimental design. The informal experimental design has three classes. One, before and after without control, after only with control design, and before and after with control design. The formal experimental design is divided into four classes. One is the completely randomized design. Two, the randomized block design. Three, the Latin square design. And four, the factorial design. We shall look into these experimental designs in detail with a few examples. We shall first look into the informal experimental design. The informal experimental designs. We shall look into the first one, the before and after without control design. Take for example, you have a target population, a group of adolescent girls who are anemic. We can recruit these adolescent girls into the study based on their willingness. We can first check their blood parameters. A basic blood parameter would be the hemoglobin level. Then we can subject this group of adolescent girls to a treatment for a specific period of time. The treatment can be of your choice. according to the facilities that are available at your end. You may choose to give them a nutrition education, teach them how to take iron-rich foods. Or if you have the support of a medical team, you can try a therapeutic dose of iron. You can carry out this treatment for a period of time, after which you can check the hemoglobin levels again. Usually, studies on hemoglobin are carried out for a period of at least 3 months, after which the hemoglobin levels may be expected to change. Now, this is a very simple experiment. The second type of informal experimental design, the after only with control design, you will have two groups of subjects. Now, looking into the example that we gave earlier and developing it a little further, we can divide the group of anemic adolescent girls into two. One group will be the experimental group and the other will be the control group. We do not carry out any investigation or recording of data before the intervention. The intervention is given for the specific period of time, usually 3 months for any study on anemia. At the end of 3 months, we test both the groups for the parameter, the hemoglobin levels. So now we will have the hemoglobin levels of two groups, one group to which the intervention has been given and the other group to which the intervention has not been given. The effect of the intervention can be determined by the difference between the hemoglobin levels of the experimental group minus that of the control group. So here we have the effect of the treatment. So this is yet another simple and informal experimental design that can be used in scientific research. The third type of informal experimental design is the before and after with control. So now, as you can see, the experimental design is becoming more elaborate. You have a target population, you choose a sample for your study, you divide them into two groups, that is the experimental group and the control group, and you carry out investigations before and after the intervention. So the experiment is more elaborate. You are keeping in control several factors that may influence the effect of the treatment. For example, since you have two groups, the control and the experiment, which are similar in various aspects, like for example, if you take the adolescent girls, maybe their age, their body parameters, and the degree to which they are anemic will be similar. The intervention given to one group will make the difference in the hemoglobin levels. So finally, at the end of the experimental period, you carry out an investigation on the hemoglobin levels and see if they have changed. So these three are the informal experimental designs. Second type of experimental design is the formal experimental design. This is divided into 4 classes. The first and the most simplest one is the completely randomized design. Here, a group of people may be divided into two. To one, a treatment may be given, and to the other, it may be withdrawn. Now, take for example a vaccine. A vaccine can be given to a group of 500 children, and another 500 who are equally matched in age, in gender, and in their social economic background may not be given the treatment. And you can follow up this group for a period of time to see if the disease occurs. So here you can compare the two groups to say if the vaccine was useful in preventing the occurrence of a particular disease. One note of caution before we continue: all experimental designs must follow ethics in research, because it is not right to withhold a treatment that will be advantageous from a group of people. So this has to be done with great caution. Now let us continue with the second type of formal experimental design. Now this is a randomized block design. Now as you can see from the table, it is a little more elaborate. Once again, you have the placebo, which is non-treatment, and you have the vaccine, and you give it to a group of people who are equally matched in gender. And from this you can find out the outcome. So here what we are trying to do is, you are also trying to find out if gender has any influence on the treatment that is given or not given. So this is the second type of formal experimental design. The third type of formal experimental design is the Latin square design. It is used where the researcher desires to control the variation in an experiment that is related to rows and columns in the field. Now just look at the table. Now in this table we have 4 rows and we have 4 columns. Now each is represented by an alphabet. So A, B, C and D. If you want to have a more visual picture of this design, let us look at the plot. Now in this plot you have 16 squares, and in these you have rows and columns. They are arranged in rows and columns. If you look very carefully, in each row or in each column, you will not have the same colored plant. This is just to show that if a plot of land is divided into rows and columns to make 16 cells, and seeds are planted in all the 16 cells, the plants will grow in such a way that they are influenced by the nurture of the soil. If there are any differences in the nurture due to the location of each plant, then this will show up in the variation in the growth of the plant. This kind of design is very useful in agriculture. because it is more easy to adopt this design in a plot of land than in a group of people. Now let us go on to see the fourth type of formal experimental design, the factorial design. In this design, you have more factors that are involved. Suppose an investigator is interested in examining three components of a weight loss intervention. The three components being keeping a food diary, increasing activity, and the third one, home visits. The investigator plans to manipulate each of these components experimentally. Thus, each becomes an independent variable. You have 2 into 2 into 2, that is the 3 levels, or 2 to the power of 3. Have a look at this table. It gives you a very clear picture of how we are designing the experiment. The experimental conditions are 8 in number, 1, 2, 3 up to 8. The three factors are keeping a food diary, increasing physical activity, and home visits. Now look at each of the conditions. Say for example 1. In 1, there is no food diary, there is no physical activity, and there is no home visit. In 2, the first two factors are not there, but the third factor, home visits, yes, it is there. The third condition, the first factor is not there, the third factor is not there, but the second factor is there. So, like this we go on up to the 8 conditions where you have a permutation and combination of these 3 different factors. So, in this experimental design, you make it more elaborate. Therefore, from this experiment, if you would like to find out the effect of physical activity, then you will have to calculate the main effect of physical activity of the conditions 1, 2, 5 and 6 compared with 3, 4, 7 and 8. As you can see from the table, in the conditions 1, 2, 5 and 6, physical activity is not given as an intervention. But in conditions 3, 4, 7 and 8, physical activity is given as an intervention. Of course, in these two groups, the effect of the other two variables, that is keeping a food diary and home visits, are also there. In 2 of them they would be present and in 2 of them they would be absent. So finally, to arrive at the conclusion from this kind of an experiment, you will have to determine the F ratio. The F ratio is a statistical analysis which you will be learning in another module. Okay friends, so we have come to the conclusion of this module. I am sure you've learnt a lot. You can go over it again and see how many different types of experiments you have been using. We use experiments in our day-to-day situation, and we use experiments to invent something new in science. So, I'm sure you are all in the spirit of experimenting now. Go on, experiment in your area of specialization. Thank you.